Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone from around the globe who has joined today's HfS webinar. My name is Saurabh Gupta. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at HfS. I lead our global research and advisory business, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. We have an exciting discussion today on why and how a leading Spanish wine manufacturer, Concha, is building a living and breathing and responsive supply chain, and we'll especially discuss some of their initiatives around the digital order management. So I'm joined by a couple of executives from Concha as well as OmPrompt, and I'd like them to quickly introduce themselves. So Claire, why don't you go first? Hi, Claire, you might be on mute.
Hi there, I'm Claire Reaney. I've always worked within supply chain in the drinks industry, and I've been at Concha since 2007, heading up the logistics function.
Great. Catherine?
Hi, I'm Catherine Morehouse, and I joined CYT in 2015. I've been working in customer services and the wine industry for over 18 years.
Great. And last but not least, Gareth.
Hi, my name's Gareth Bennett, and I head up product strategy at OnPrompt. I actually come from a CPG background myself and took the leap into technology, and now I focus on helping our customers understand obviously our product, but also understand what the market needs are.
Great, thank you everyone. So what we are going to focus on in today's session is really three main themes. So one, why supply chain management needs to adopt what we at HfS calls the Digital OneOffice. We'll talk a little bit about the emergence of this responsive and somewhat perceptive supply chains, which Gareth likes to call the sentient supply chains. And then, of course, we'll focus on Concha's journey and the lessons learned from that. And we'll be taking questions throughout the conversations. We'll also block some time towards the end of this discussion. So for everyone, please use that little Q&A box that you can see on your screen and type away any questions that you might have, and I'll pick them up as we go through. We'll pick some of the questions towards the end, and if we can't answer everything today, we'll definitely follow up. So let's get started, right? And look, here at HfS, we've been studying and researching supply chain operations for a number of years, and the supply chain management, supply chain cost base represents a whopping $3 trillion. And yet there are a number of challenges that every executive from every global 2000 firm that I've ever talked to continues to face. There are top line losses. People have to go through inventory sell-offs. There are inflated cost of goods sold. Customer experience is often poor. There's customer churn. There's revenue leakage, and all of that, or a number of reasons, can be traced back to underperforming supply chains, from lack of data visibility to ineffective planning and forecasting to fragmented processes. To even ineffective aftermarket services and of course ineffective order management. So there are a number. Supply chain continues to be a headache for a number of senior executives. But over the last 2 years, we've seen a number of sort of emerging technologies starting to come in, from robotic process automation that can help you sort of automate some of the transactional rule-based processes, to artificial intelligence and all its different dimensions of natural language processing, to computer vision, to machine learning, and even deep learning, which makes automation even more intelligent. There's a huge overlap between artificial intelligence and smart analytics, or predictive and prescriptive learning, where especially through machine learning algorithms, you can not only automate or improve the straight-through processing, but also can take better decisions. And then more recently, we've started to see the emergence of blockchain or distributed ledgers, which is changing the paradigm for supply chain, and trying to move supply chains from these slow and reactive beasts to becoming very agile, very perceptive, and fairly proactive networks. But having said that, I don't think that just throwing technology is going to be enough. And organizations will need to have an operating framework that maps out how they have to operate in the future. And that is what the Digital OneOffice, our Digital OneOffice, tries to convey. Uh, the traditional operating models, while have created some incremental productivity value, if managed effectively, they've struggled to drive the unification of digital business models with all these emerging technologies across the entire length and breadth of an enterprise. Uh, I think there's only one office that matters. We've been dealing in this world of front office, middle office, back office, but there's really one office that matters, and that's the office that caters to the customer. The traditional approaches of organizational restructuring have almost failed uh, to to serve a purpose beyond incremental efficiency and productivity. And that's why the Digital OneOffice, where you have a customer-centric digital organization uh, right at the front, driven by a digital underbelly of digitization, automation, cloudification, uh, having a circulatory system of these intelligent support functions, the traditional back office, and then leveraging the predictive cognitive machine learning and blockchain and other emerging technologies to drive insights is a good vision and a framework um, that organizations can use as an end state to survive and succeed. In fact, we did some research of senior executives across 400 different global 2000 firms, and 74% of our respondents said that it's business critical to work without the rigidity of the traditional organizational silos. And essentially, that is an overwhelming response of why we need to move to something like a Digital OneOffice. And 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 the Digital OneOffice is very true in the case of supply chains as well. Supply chains of the future need to be collaborative. We need to think of collective outcomes. Supply chains of the future need to be unified. They need to be dynamic. They cannot be reactive. Supply chains of the future need to be intelligent, predictive. Supply chains of the future need to be responsive. They need to have real-time decision making. And last but not the least, perhaps the most important thing is supply chains today are becoming very, very complex, and we need to figure out ways of making supply chains simple. So with that in mind, let's sort of ask Claire and Catherine from Concha on what they've been doing in their supply chain. So maybe I'll start with you, Claire. Uh, how would you say the maturity of supply chain, of Concha's supply chain, has developed over the last, say, 2 years?
So we were very digitally immature. We massively lacked automation, struggling with manual order processing, a total lack of visibility really over our warehousing and bottling plants. We were extracting paper reports at the end of every day to figure out where our shortfalls were. And certainly over the last 24 months at least, we've undertaken various projects, really starting with EDI automation all the way through now to invoice automation. And we're on a journey, and we're very much trying to get other departments in the business to review their processes and look at how they can automate as well.
I know certainly when I joined Concha, I estimated that we were actually 15 years behind our competitors when you compared our EDI to, say, other order-to-cash processes I'd worked with. And I think we've caught up an awful lot. I would say we're ahead in certain aspects, such as the touchless orders and the on-prompt platform. We've still got more work to do, especially with further order automation and optimizing our ERP system that we share with our parent company.
Thanks, Catherine. So where do you go from here? So I think you really articulated the challenges and some of your initiatives, but what's the sort of vision let's say if we look at 2 or 3 years down the line?
So you can kind of see in the slides a bit of detail. So we've got quite an aggressive objective in terms of delivering a 40% increase in net margin over the next 2 years. We're very much focused on delivering first-class customer service, and we're still aiming to drive more process and system efficiencies, and implement even more of OnPrompt's Sentient Supply Chain platform, and develop a much more fit for purpose customer contact strategy. One of our other areas is trying to improve customer perception of us. There are industry recognised reports, certainly in the drinks industry, that we participate in, such as the Advantage survey, and bringing in a company like OnPrompt has meant that not only can we implement process improvements, but we've done it so much quicker than had we had to go it alone, relying on our own IT team based in Chile. Even more than that, OnPrompt's team do have an ability to see and implement improvements where we simply can't. I think I described this as they have got they're very much able to see the wood for the trees and help their customers in ways that you don't think are possible. And we would never have imagined the level of operational visibility that the platform's given us already, and certainly its future potential for us is huge.
Great. No, that was that is fairly aggressive goals. You mentioned the sentient supply chain a couple of times. So let me bring Gareth into the conversation. Gareth, help us understand what this sentient supply chain is. What's OnPrompt's vision towards improving supply chains, especially around the order management area that Claire and Catherine were just mentioning.
Sure, I think you summed well. Your introduction into the challenges was very clear. Is that there are many variables within the operational supply chain in today's world, and they are constantly flexing and changing, and you need the capabilities to adapt to those changes very quickly. So we see a sentient supply chain as about gathering as much information as possible, and identifying the most important parts of that information so that you can either react faster or work proactively. And that works on many levels, but that can be around actually how you trade and integrate with individual organizations, but also how the processes are working and what the service performance is into your customers. So we work very closely with organizations to help them proactively manage their customers through order processing, fulfillment, and settlement processes, so that end to end. And we do that through what we call connecting the multi-enterprise supply chain together. So that is your customers, your suppliers, your third-party organizations that you work with, including your own internal people and systems, bringing that into one central location, making sense of everything that is going on. Everybody has one view then of fundamentally the truth, and that derives a lot more process efficiencies, and it's about addressing, in terms of many of the challenges that we see up on the screen, which many organizations are plagued with today, which is either legacy systems or disjointed systems, organizations not working collaboratively to actually serve the end goal of the customer, heavily manual processes that have developed over time as fundamentally workarounds to maybe some of the disjointed systems or lack of capabilities within enterprise systems that are in-house. The hidden operational costs and fulfillment errors that can go on a daily basis, some often can be avoided. Not being able to actually see performance is one of the key things. And then fundamentally that then all gets impacted as well upon the customer, who fundamentally we need to be keeping happy and growing those customer accounts and delivering a lot higher levels of service. So we're out as an organisation and with our platform to help turn those problems around and enable organisations like Concha to really step up into the next level and give a far better service to their customers. Next slide, if you don't mind. Thank you. I mean, many of the challenges that we see in the day-to-day problems that we are going out to solve, when you combine those together, they cause enormous headache and cost for organizations, for supply chain organizations, and of course for customers. So we look to have answers to many of these different challenges in a combined way, in a single platform that allows organizations to mature and develop at their own speed, to work with digital tools like ours at their own pace, and over time, for example, in Concha's case, develop a much more coherent way of working. So if you look at all of these different challenges here with stakeholders, different ways of communicating with each other, different systems, old and new, master data challenges, document information and how it's shared, business terms, different territories and languages, the day-to-day challenges of just trying to move goods from A to B, whatever those goods might be. And then you put on top of that, in terms of how organizations are structured and how information or knowledge is captured, you blow that up on a global scale and then you try and operate at scale. That becomes a very, very difficult thing. And what we tend to find is organizations often just add complexity on complexity, rather than trying to not necessarily re-engineer their organizations, but look for a complete alternative, which is what we're hoping we can bring to them. So in terms of supply chains today and where we work with organizations, we find that I think people are starting to become much more digitally aware. The market knowledge is increasing a lot in terms of people's awareness around the different tools that they can perhaps start to deploy and the different technologies that are becoming available. And that makes for very, very interesting conversations. We see supply chains going in a direction of taking a business to consumer type approach to customer service and bringing that in a business to business type environment. The pressures within the marketplace is driving that, with people becoming more and more accustomed to excellent and efficient customer experiences in their own personal and private lives, and interacting with technologies in their own private lives that are much more sophisticated. And that expectation is now being moved into the business to business environment. And so what Unprompt is setting out to do with our customers is enable them to deliver that level of service, all of the way from basic things like being able to provide the accurate, timely status updates to where an order is at any one moment in time, but also to proactive customer service in terms of resetting expectations, being able to upsell and cross-sell with individuals, becoming much more collaborative with the customer base, and also working much more closely with supplier communities and also with 3PL, logistics and warehousing providers that they work with. And that really leads them to having much more control over the supply chain, a lot more visibility, as Claire was mentioning, and we call that true end-to-end visibility. So that's a outside-in approach rather than an inside-out approach, which has been, I would say, over the last 10 years or more, with an ERP-centric approach. We're flipping that on its head in terms of thinking about what is all of the information that is being shared, structured, unstructured, spreadsheets, PDF, emails, ERP data, whatever it might be in whatever format, that is valuable information. And to put that, if you can get that and put that in the right context, make sense of it, understand it, and present it to the right teams, it becomes very, very powerful. So that's what we're doing. Sorry. Yeah.
No, Gareth, that's helpful. There's a question here from the audience that's you mentioned ERPs and how you're sort of looking at augmenting ERPs. What really is the issue here? Are ERPs really disjointed?
I don't think the issue is with ERP at all. I think it's our mindset towards enterprise systems, and when you configure a system to only do a certain set of things, then that becomes the way you look at the world. What we are saying is that we can very much complement many existing enterprise investments So this is not rip and replace at all. This is advancing what you've already invested in through new technologies in the cloud, so that you can really maximize your investment and turn that mindset from which we often see, which is an inside out type approach, to an outside in, thinking about the customer first and foremost. That's true customer centricity. And you need to, in order to achieve that, you need to think beyond your four walls, beyond your enterprise. And where we bring that as our view of the world and our mindset, and we deploy that into our platform, our technology, and our engagements with our customers. And Claire and Catherine will speak to it, I'm sure, but that's very much the approach that we're taking with Concha.
Oh, thank you, Gareth. So let's move to maybe Catherine again, and sort of peel the onion a little bit more on what you guys are doing here. So help us understand, Catherine, a little bit more on how are you using this Sentient Supply Chain platform, especially in the world of sort of order management.
Well, we're actually using it in a number of pretty impactful ways for us. Order management starts with the customer order, and we believe it doesn't finish until the invoice is paid and the cash is collected. And OnPrompt is able to help us at each part of this process. What we're doing is taking on strategic bite-sized chunks with OnPrompt where we are feeling some pressure and we need the most help and support. We started by using their EDI capabilities for customer services and to make our order processing less manual and more automated and efficient. And now we have about 58% of our shipment volume running through the platform. And these processes are being enhanced by the Sentient Supply Chain platform. And one of our goals with OnPrompt for the future is focusing on improving our operational visibility. We want to minimize the manual input of our data and also have clear visibility of our internal and external KPIs, which is something we really struggle with at the moment. We're also intending in the future to increase our utilization of the platform to cover 100% of our order volume and also incorporate the supplier side of our order management processes.
Got it. So help us understand a little bit more on how did you make the sort of selection of this platform? What went into that decision-making process?
Well, as a growing business, we realised that our existing EDI provider couldn't manage any of our customer orders and invoices in the way that we required. The existing process was filled with format changes and challenges and gaps. We had to manually process EDI orders and invoices, and we often suffered from service issues relating to our previous EDI provider, and we lost some sales because of it. And at the time of bringing OnPrompt into the business, both I and our supply chain director had previous experience of working with OnPrompt on order automation before, so we were keen to use them again and start seeing the same benefits we'd witnessed in our previous roles.
Understood.
We have some challenges that are a bit peculiar to Concha and maybe other businesses, that all IT development was actually done by our head office in Chile, which, because of the time zone and language barrier, it was holding us back a bit, and also because we're an outlying office, it wasn't always their priority to help us. So that was another reason for us choosing OnPrompt, that they could really help us to automate this with relative ease compared to what we had internally, and also that it was compatible with our existing processes and systems.
Got it. So one, before we move on, I think there are a number of questions in the chat window, as everyone can see, is if maybe Gareth, you can describe what OnPrompt is, right? Is it an ERP? Is it a middleware? Is it a what it is? I think there's a lot of chat going on, and it might be helpful to sort of get that clarified.
Well, there's some great questions going on, yeah. So OnPrompt provides a platform which is as a managed service in the cloud, which if you imagine, sits in and around your enterprise environment and will connect you to your customers, your suppliers, and your third-party providers, regardless of how they operate. So that is regardless of the enterprise systems they use and the way they share data. So the different EDI formats, structured, unstructured data, PDFs, spreadsheets, emails. So there's a connection component. It automates the flow of that data between the two systems with intelligence. So it understands the context of the data, what it actually means, what's the importance of it. And that is a very configurable capability within the platform, so that we can turn a PDF into into an EDI message, for example, but understand the importance of it. We can validate and apply business compliance checks to that flow of information. And then over the top of that, it provides a visibility layer that allows you to see end to end. Basically, the more data you put in, the more you see. So it allows you to achieve an end-to-end view of your multi-enterprise operational supply chain. And again, with an intelligent component behind that. So it is constantly watching, monitoring, alerting, finding exceptions, and pushing those to the right individuals so that they can manage those. So there's three core layers to that platform, which is connectivity, the control layer around the business compliance and validation, and the visibility layer. It sits up in the cloud, delivered as a managed service, completely complementary to your customer, your supplier, 3PL, and your enterprise environment. Non-intrusive into ERP, and you can use as much or as little of it as you like in terms of customizing it and using it to your own needs, so that you don't rewrite or reinvest things you've already done.
Got it. No, that's helpful. Thank you, Gareth. So, Claire, maybe I can ask you a question around. You've been doing this now for some time. What has been the impact? What have you achieved so far?
So it's definitely allowed us to realise certain goals were achievable and we could get there faster than we had originally thought. So we've got ongoing strategies across the business, but automation, efficiency, and all the benefits that come along from doing projects like advanced shipping notifications for key retailers, they're definitely impacting our progress going forward. But just to sort of give my view on what Gareth's just discussed, we're still onboarding the platform. We're only at the beginning of the journey, but already we've seen that our logistics processes have massively streamlined. We're now in a position to increase focus on customer relationships and performance, because we actually have a clear view of the operation from the order not even hitting our own email system. We can see the orders all the way to the order being to the end of the process when the customer finally pays, and everything in between, any non-conformance, literally any event that happens in the logistics process, we can see. We simply couldn't access this before very easily. And the information's now in context. It's not in isolation. It's all in one place. We've got historical email trails that are constantly being watched as well by OnPrompt, and by the platform, and they can highlight even down to whether the sense of an email is negative or positive. It's really brought major benefits to us as a business.
Thank you. And could you also highlight what have been some of the challenges, right? Pretty sure this is not smooth sailing. What were some of the big challenges that you faced as you've gone through this journey?
So the main issue for us has been around probably our data gathering, and it's actually been understanding all of the points where we can obtain data. The challenge hasn't been working with OnPrompt. The challenge has very much been internal for us, and understanding really what we could do, and what the I can't think of the word, but how OnPrompt and how the platform could help us. And it was realizing how we could actually take it forward with no limits, basically.
Got it. No, that's helpful to understand. why? One more question, Claire, for you, and then I'll ask Gareth. Why do these changes take so long, right? Why can't things move faster in today's world, even in today's world?
So I think it's very much down to the individual business. In our case, our IT department is largely based in Chile, which is our head office, and they are very much focused on the operation. They're not focused on how they can sort of bring operational visibility to their outlying and subsidiary officers. So we're only restricted by ourselves. One thing we've discovered here, we're only restricted by ourselves. We're not being we're literally only the limit is within our business. It's not and the data that we've got, it's not with the platform.
Got it. Oh, that's very helpful. So hey, look, we've got tons of questions here. So I'll try and ask as many as I can to our panelists. I think the first one, maybe Catherine, if you can help us understand what was the impact of this journey on your existing systems, if any.
Well, we did have to adapt our systems and processes, but it was fairly minimal, really. We had some internal SAP, which is our ERP development, and some infrastructure changes to link the systems, and that was probably the most challenging area we had. I remember the initial EDI transition took 9 months. However, that was mainly down to the fact that our head office was outside of the UK. That delayed approval and development. But what we found was that once we had that initial setup done, that subsequent projects have actually been a lot faster because all the groundwork has already been done, all the connections were in place. For example, we can now easily, really, we've got iDocs and things that we can interface directly into the platform. So I think we might have had some pain very initially, but that actually has meant that it's been much smoother in the long term.
Got it. So thanks, Catherine. I think there's been a number of questions on how do we get today's PPT and the materials. And before I move on to other questions, we will have a recording of this session along with these documents on our website, and all of you will get an email on how to sort of get that after the event. So with that, let me ask Gareth. Gareth, one of the audience member here is asking us, where is artificial intelligence applied here, other than in documents and EDI? And do you also have any voice, sort of a cognitive agent or a virtual assistant here?
So the application of AI sort of stems across machine learning capabilities, language identification capabilities. We're doing, in terms of our roadmap and our focus, is also around cognitive algorithms. And the application of machine learning, and obviously this is a continual development exercise. We don't stop when it in this respect, but his ability to identify exceptions and learn from exceptions as individuals interact. So the platform, the AI component within the platform, is blending technology and individuals together, or human in the loop, and through that you learn about what the individual is doing, what the users are doing, as they are either supporting the processing of data or the management of exceptions related to whatever piece of data that might be, and learning from that, and over time reducing the volume of exceptions. The other areas in around, as I think Claire was referring to, is being able to understand the content of emails that are being shared from, for example, between a supplier and yourselves, and identifying possible exceptions related to individual orders within that, and also work, as I say, in and around the cognitive algorithms that are using wider pool of data to support impact analysis, and moving towards a proactive approach to try and identify possible exceptions before they've actually occurred, through the control component of our platform. So our application of AI is multifaceted, ever developing, and we deploy it in some key areas that fundamentally are helping us drive down unnecessary intervention in processing over time, so that we can get smarter. Our users don't have to repeat the same activities over and over again, and then also, as I say, moving to much more to a proactive type world.
Got it. Hey, thanks, Gareth. I think from our perspective at HfS, we believe that there is no one technology, be it AI, be it robotic automation, be it blockchain, be it anything else, that's going to be the nirvana for the problems that we face in this supply chain. I think it's going to be a combination of that, and that's why I always refer to the power of and versus the power of or. And the more solutions, the more services, and how we adopt them across the sort of the AAA trifecta, right, of automation, analytics, and AI. And if we are able to sort of look at solutions that fall at the intersection of that, that's when really powerful problems can be solved. So, but yeah, thanks, Gareth. I think your answer was really helpful. So,
Well,
sorry, go on.
I was just going to, if I may add a point to sort of what I was talking about there. So one of the key challenges, and I think the Concha team were referring to this, is about access to the data. One of the key things that we focus on Prompt is our ability to capture data using different tools. So within our toolbox, basically within the platform, optical character recognition, which I'm sure many individuals are familiar with, is just one of many, and that is only applied to images. If there is ability to capture data from an email, a spreadsheet, a PDF, something like that, of course you've got the standard structured data through EDI, then use a different tool. Higher accuracy, much more efficient. The deployment of RPA, for example, is just another tool within the toolbox to go and grab something from a portal to post it somewhere else for somebody. It's just a tool in the toolbox to capture and move information around. The real value comes from what does the data tell you, how is it combined together, and how is that presented to the end user to help them achieve their goals. And that's where we really need to focus. But the toolbox is ever growing and being ever developed.
Yep. Oh, that makes sense. So let me ask Claire this question. Were there any pleasant surprises? You've talked a lot about your plans. You've talked a lot about the challenges that you faced. But as you sort of, were there any pleasant surprises? Were there any unforeseen benefits that you got as a result of all these initiatives?
For sure. I think the biggest one was just having visibility of something that we never imagined we would be able to capture in one place. I think one thing that happens when you stay in an organisation for a long time is you get used to workarounds, as Gareth already alluded to. You get used to working with suboptimal processes, and it's quite difficult to imagine what the future could look like. And that's where working with a company like OnPrompt really helps us, because they can see possibilities that we simply cannot. They've got the technology behind them that we're just simply not aware of. When we were approached to start working with the platform, we never imagined that in such a short space of time. I think that was the biggest pleasant surprise, was how quickly we were able to get visibility, and it's freed up a huge amount of time in our teams of people doing tedious admin, and we can actually really, everyone always talks about focusing on value adding activities, but we actually can do that now, which is hugely beneficial.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. So I think there are a number of questions also around the return on investment, Claire. Can you talk us through a little bit of that? What was the return on investment, and have you already realized it, or Is it something for the future? How are you looking at that?
Okay, so the return on investment started to be achieved when headcount savings started to be realised, and this actually began with the very first EDI project once it went live. So that was sort of after 9 months. At this point in time, so we're 18 months on now, and we've saved a headcount of 2 in supply chain, and we've managed to absorb additional work into supply chain, which here comprises of logistics, planning and customer services. And we're able to change strategic focus to customer relationship building, which, if it's actually done properly, should be extremely time consuming rather than just sort of paying lip service to it.
Yep. No, that makes sense. So there's another question on beyond order management. Have you seen any impact on, let's say, on the planning side, or on fulfillment or billing related activities? Has there been any other impact on the beyond just, say, the order management piece of it? And if yes, how? So I don't know, Catherine or Claire, if one of you wants to take that one.
So I'll take the first bit around the planning side. So we've deliberately divided this project into 2 because it is such a big project for us, and we did focus the initial part of the project on sort of the customer services and the order management side, but now we're starting to look at the next phase, which will be focusing on the planning aspect of the business. We're starting that by integrating the volume forecast at customer and SKU level into the platform, which will hit the platform before orders hit the ERP system. So it will enable us live monitoring of order status. It will enable us to see much further down the supply chain impacts of under or over forecast. And we're really excited about the next phase.
Got it. So Catherine, maybe you can help us understand, how are you managing DSO, or daily sales outstanding?
So before we had the platform, we were relying on a number of sources to give us the information that we needed. It was quite time consuming, but now we can see, really get a good picture on what's happening without having to log on to various portals or contacting our transporters, looking at various SAP status reports. So it's really giving us one place to see all the information that we actually need, and it can give us alerts for things that we were overdue, say invoices were overdue and we should have raised them. So that makes us look into what's happened, and also if deliveries should have been delivered and they haven't been, we can track those and then actually chase up what's happening. So it's kind of forewarning us about events, if you like.
Understood. Yeah. So there's another question on, we've talked about automation, we've talked about AI. How is blockchain impacting supply chains? And maybe I'll take that one. I think blockchain is fundamentally starting to change how we look at supply chains, right? We've seen, uh, uh, especially in the supply chain world, from track and trace to sort of understanding who's doing what from farm to the customer, is something that blockchains or distributed ledgers are enabling. Uh, and when we've been doing our research in supply chain and blockchain, we've started to see that blockchain is sort of actually springboarding all these blockchain efforts in financial services. Blockchain efforts in supply chains are springboarding those, primarily because there's such a big market lacuna in supply chain, where there is no sort of other technology or other solution that is offering that. So we've seen a number of interesting sort of uses of blockchain. Having said that, I think blockchain is still in what I call the 99.1 adoption pattern. wherein 90% of the enterprises still don't know what it is. 9% are sort of starting to figure out what can they do with it, and there's only a handful, if I may, who've got a credible pilot of sorts, and who are doing something credible. So it's still nascent. There are challenges with standards, there are challenges with regulatory issues, there are challenges with technical architecture. The products are also nascent, but the promise is huge, and the promise is fairly fundamental in the way that we'll look at supply chains. So that was a blockchain question. I'm glad nobody's asked questions on quantum computing yet. But there's another question on data management, and maybe Gareth, I can ask this to you. From a data cleansing point of view, especially at a customer level, was there a requirement for much work in advance of implementation that you advise your clients, or how does that how is the whole data cleansing part handled?
I'll answer that question in two ways then. The first being related to how we engage and our approach, and then maybe some just advice to the marketplace and to your listeners in terms of some things they could do in advance that would obviously be beneficial for any project in this kind of area. The first one is that we don't want to impact our customers when it comes to integrating. And one of the key things that we do is a lot around master data translation. So I've talked about the key entities within the operational supply chain, the multi-enterprise supply chain in terms of customers and suppliers and many other people that get involved, and they all operate in their own different ways. They have different ways of managing SKUs, of location information and pricing and who knows what. So what OnPrompt does is buffer that noise through our ability to translate codes from one thing to the other, and we also support that with machine learning as well, so that if we go into an organization that maybe hasn't quite got their master data in maybe the place that they would like it through, because they've been through acquisitions, or it's never been quite a big focus for the organization because digitization has never been focus. Those kinds of challenges is they can start with OnPrompt and start to improve master data as they process by utilizing the human in the loop capability with machine learning under the hood. So that's one thing. That's one of our approaches to helping around data management, so to speak, and making sure that all parties that are connected and wanting to collaborate together are doing so in an efficient and accurate way. That's obviously mandatory. In terms of people who are looking to approach these kinds of projects with an organization like ours, or whatever that might be, is if they can be in a position where they are able to organize their master data or identify at least the gaps in the master data quite clearly and begin working on that, then that is obviously a big advantage to when you actually engage and you begin a project. Master data underpin, particularly when you're having to go outside of your organization and you're communicating information to and from, is having master data in good state is very, very important. It underpins the whole sort of project, so to speak. So any advanced work that can be done on that is always welcome, but we know that focus, time, attention, money, all of those factors come into play, and therefore sometimes reality doesn't allow that to happen.
Yeah. So Gareth, staying with you, one more question is about security, or enterprise grade security, and how you sort of deal with that, because you're dealing with a lot of sensitive and confidential information.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's very, very important to us. So we're ISO accredited 27001, 9001 anyway. Our cloud is in terms of accreditation with security is up to the highest industry standards. We run a multi-tenant platform so that obviously everyone benefits from the updates that we can provide them through the managed service angle of our operation. But data is always held within an individual instance for our customers, so that there is no risk of crossover, there is no risk of exposure, and that's also in terms of user permissions and settings and configurations there as well. So we absolutely take our clients' data and their security very, very seriously indeed. You know, we are supporting mission critical businesses and mission critical processes. So in terms of our uptime of 24/7, 365, always making sure that we are operating for our customers and not impacting those services, because one of the key things is that often when on-prompt is implemented, it's not, in case of a headcount reduction, is not necessarily what actually occurs. It's more of a repositioning of priorities and roles and tasks. And so if of course we were to withdraw on prompt as a solution for some of our customers, then they might have a bit of a challenge in terms of actually fulfilling that particular process. So we do understand the importance we play within their business.
Got it. So this is an interesting question, and maybe I'll throw it at Claire and Catherine. If you had to do this project all over again, what would you do differently?
I think there are definitely some technical things that I certainly wasn't aware of, and probably never want to be aware of ever again. But luckily that we have internally very good IT people. So I think there were some things there that we weren't aware of, and we jumped in, I think, without quite realizing our own limitations. But I think the biggest thing would probably be that not to underestimate what we needed. I think or not have the vision of what could be done. I think we started off thinking in a very narrow-minded way of what we needed, without actually understanding what we could have and what we have now. We have so much visibility and so many options. And in fact, now if we have a problem, or there's something that we need a solution for, probably one of the first things we do is think, actually, can the platform and on-prompt help us with this? Because, you know, we are sharing so much information with the platform that most things inevitably will be in there. So, you know, that's probably, to begin with, we didn't have any concept that this is what we would end up with. Whereas, of course, if we knew now what we knew, you know, if we knew then what we knew now, it would be quite different. And I think we'd probably approach it quite differently than the very narrow-minded way we kind of set out to it. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And another question is why, and perhaps we'll bring Catherine in here, why did you start with EDI orders and versus something else? Was there a specific reason, or you just wanted to start with something? So why not EDI?
We started with EDI because we had an EDI provider, but at the time we were just printing the orders, and then we were manually keying those orders into our SAP ERP system, and for invoices we were then manually typing them back into the EDI provider's portal or into the customer's portal. And our existing EDI provider would have actually interfaced into our system, but that's absolutely all they would have done. It would have been a very off-the-shelf version, and we wanted more. I'd seen touchless orders in a previous role in the wine industry, and I'd seen how it could really help with the non-EDI customers, and so I knew that there was something better than the previous EDI provider could give. So but that was our biggest challenge at the time. EDI, manually keying EDI orders was taking up so much of our resource. We had to address that. It had been neglected for several years, really.
No, that makes sense. So Gareth, here's another interesting discussion that has been happening here is BPO versus insourcing versus platform versus automation versus all these different kinds of things. Help us understand the ecosystem, right? Where do you fit in? Where do you sort of get your partners? I know you have partners like Genpact and others. Where do they fit in? do you also leverage some other third-party technology tools? I think there's some people have mentioned UiPath or Automation Anywhere or what have you. Help us understand the ecosystem a little bit, because
Yeah, sure.
I think in today's world, there's no one company which can be everything to everyone. So help us
Absolutely not.
describe the ecosystem.
And it's a very complex ecosystem and getting ever more complex now. So we are less worried about if you are wishing to innovate within your own teams, whether or not you work globally or you centralize those into one office, whether or not you've outsourced those to a business, another business such as the ones you've mentioned. What we are fundamentally focused on is those kinds of potentially manual processes in those worlds, particularly with outsourcing or management of EDI capabilities, is we're interested in helping facilitate those in a more efficient and accurate way. So we complement obviously the BPO offering to quite a large extent, and you've sort of alluded to some of our partners. As I say, we're geographic in terms of geography of how you organise your actual businesses. We don't mind if you're fragmented across the globe in terms of how different teams are structured. That's not a problem for us because we're up in the cloud. You can centralise that up into the cloud. And as a platform, one of our key things is, and you're right, we don't want to say that we can do everything. We're very much focused on demand and supply sides of the order management processes. So we go supply side as very much as we do demand, and we would work with something like Automation Anywhere or UiPath type bots if that was necessary. We're very flexible in our integration. At the moment, we're using our own in-house type RPA capabilities, but that's nothing to say that we can't complement those if you have investments within RPA tools as it stands today. The difference there is that the RPA tool will be doing a specific set of tasks or multiple tasks, depending how many you've got, and we'll be doing those to a very good degree. The difference here is that you step up a level from the transactional type process with OnPrompt. We absolutely facilitate the transactional flow of information, but you step up a level and you start running it from a business level, so that actually how is that order looking as it's working its way across the different processes, the different geographies, the different parties that are involved. And that's the key difference here. So being able to join the data together, so taking data that a bot might be accessing and using, that your ERP system might be having, that you might be given by email, whatever those things are, and bringing that together up into a business level to find the real impact. That's the key difference here. So there's absolutely a transactional play as well. But I'm hoping I've answered the question in regards to working with other third parties.
Yeah. No, Gareth, I think that's very eloquently put. So I think there are a number of other questions, and we can potentially stay online for another 30 minutes and try and answer those. But I'll probably wrap up by one last question, and then between the four of us, we'll make sure that we answer any unanswered question post the event. And then the last question is for everyone, right? Maybe if we can go around the table or around this virtual table, is what is the one piece of advice that you would give to enterprises and our audience today who's in a similar boat trying to sort of advance either their supply chain issues or especially around order management? What's the one piece of advice that they should do tomorrow? Maybe Gareth, why don't you go first?
What they should do tomorrow. I think you need to start with what you have today. So that's the key focus. So if you think about how your process is currently working, the information you're being given, the information you're creating, and what you potentially could derive from that if you walked into a meeting room and tried to whiteboard it and put sticky notes all over the whiteboard, those kinds of things. That's where you can begin. Start with what you have access to today. That if you start to think about how you can join that together with technology and extract value from the individual pieces of information that you are creating and sharing, regardless of where they're going and who they are, then that's probably the best place, because that'll allow you to perform fundamentally gap analysis. And that gap analysis will help you derive what your priorities are and what you need to do to get there to drive continuous improvement. I think the mistakes made when they're thinking about technology is they forget to break it into chunks, and they think about the big end goal. And actually, sometimes that can be quite a journey to get there. So you've got to make incremental steps. Our fundamental way of thinking is that we want people to start where they're comfortable, where they're ready, and what they have available today, and we will keep eating away at that project with them at their own speed.
Thanks, Gareth. Claire, Catherine, any piece of advice?
I think from my point of view as customer services, it was really important that my team were part of the project with all this automation that we were doing. If you think that they'd gone from doing everything manually, they enjoyed what they were doing, and they probably quite felt that it was a threat to their roles. But in reality, what happened was that they were embracing the technology. They were seeing that it was freeing up their time, and actually it was meaning that they were doing the more interesting aspects of their roles rather than the tedious just data entry that they had been doing. And they now can spend more time chatting to their customers, going to meetings, really interacting with them. But I think they had to be part of the process and part of the journey, and I've always involved them in testing and data setup so that they really felt involved. And I think that was quite important for my team, that it wasn't just this is something this is what you're going to do, and it was all just put in front of them. They had that, they were involved in that. I think that helped quite a lot.
Okay, thanks. So I think I'm afraid that's all the time that we have today. We will get back to you with some of the unanswered questions. We took a lot of questions today. I'd like to once again thank all of you, Claire, Catherine, Gareth, for taking out the time and having this really interactive session. So thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day. Bye for now.
Thank you all. Thank you.